You know, to be fair, there aren't really many great Ford cars out there at the moment, but there are some that are very good, and this happens to be one of them. And I'll tell you why. It's because the build quality in the Mondeo is a lot better than the other Fords. You take the Ford Fiesta, the Ford Focus. To be fair, the dashboard here feels like it's made out of recycled biros. These ones, they have a bit of a more solid quality to them. They feel like they've been put together more so like as if they're going to last. Now, a perfect example of that would be the dashboard. The dashboard on this car is not far off BMW quality, whereas so many cars these days, including Mercedes, have very cheap plastic dashboards. I mean, that doesn't qualify it as a car, but throughout the whole car the build quality is there. And even though there's some sections where the plastic is a little bit shitty, like maybe on the steering wheel here, the car does feel better quality. Now, this is the 6-speed manual. If I could fault this car in any way, I would say, firstly, I think the engine's underpowered and undersized. Could do with a bigger engine. It's a big car, there's no reason why this can't have a 3-litre V6 in it. Secondly, it's a front wheel drive. Now we're going to do a 0 to 60 test now, and the roads are wet. 3, 2, 1. Steering is light, steering is very responsive, and I must confess I get to drive a lot of cars and you turn the steering wheel and nothing happens. There's a vagueness about it, whether it's worn bushes or a worn steering box. With this car, you turn the steering wheel and the wheels turn, okay? They turn instantly as well. That makes for a very enthusiastic and responsive drive. As I say, it's just a shame it's front wheel drive. Very light steering, really is quite impressive actually. Now give a bit of a wiggle test. Yeah, the car does roll around quite a bit really. But nice to see some firmer shocks on this car. I wouldn't fancy doing an emergency swerve in this car at speed, not without sport shocks anyway. Now the general interior is lovely, it's very tastefully done. Instrument cluster is partially obstructed by the top of the steering wheel, but you know, some people say, why don't you just move the steering wheel? Well, the thing is, if you move the steering wheel, you then put in the steering position in a position that you're not comfortable in. Other cars can do it, so why can't these cars? Center console, very easily laid out. You can operate that without taking your eyes off the road too much. Rear view vision, not fantastic to be fair. If there's 3 people sitting in the back, you're not going to see a lot. But the side mirrors are quite substantial, and they're in a good location. They're not too low, they're not too far, or not too near to the actual driver. Driving position does feel a bit high. I do feel a little bit too high to the steering wheel, I must admit, and even fiddling around with the seats I can't quite seem to get that right. The general interior is finished off very nicely actually, and I'm quite pleased to actually come across a Ford now that feels like it's been well manufactured. So many of the Fords just feel so cheap and nasty, and they really feel quite gnarly to drive. This one does feel like it's got the potential to be a great car. Now I think if somebody could get one of these cars and stick a nice big powerful engine in, I don't know what models are available now, but if you had something like a 3-litre, 3.5-litre V6, this would be a great car to drive. The only downfall, the front wheel drive business. So, you know, it's not a driver's car, but anybody thinking about buying one of these is not going to be disappointed because they are a good drive. Now, what can sometimes let these cars down is manufacturers taking shortcuts, and one of the shortcuts I do tend to come across is the brakes. But with this car, the brakes are just as good as the rest of the other car, just as good as the rest of the car. They don't grippy, they're not grabbing. I get to apply gradual pressure, and they do feel in harmony with the car as they brake. Now let's just give it a little bit of a test. Yeah, very smooth brakes, very smooth. In fact, the transition through these gears is very impressive too. It's a very smooth gearbox, it's very sure, very certain, and I have to say I'm really very pleased with this car. I'm going to give it a high score. Out of 10, I would have to give this a 7, maybe even an 8, because the steering is just so good. The drive quality is fantastic. It really is a fantastic drive, this. And to summarise, I can only really recap what I've said. If anybody's thinking about buying one of these and you're really looking for the best driving experience that you're going to get out of this particular car, I think the bigger engine you go, the bigger the engine, the better the drive is going to be. It's a good car. You might want to check one of these out if you're thinking about buying one.